and she understood something the tribunal feared most, that endurance, even when shattered, is a kind of rebellion. By the time they lowered Isabel from the ropes, her arms trembled uncontrollably, joints swollen purple with cold and strained breath, thin and uneven. The assistants avoided touching her bare skin, as if the pain they inflicted could travel back into them through contact. They draped her with a shawl, rough wool, cheaper than her dress, and when it brushed her shoulders, that same scratch returned. She clung to it like a lifeline, because now the tribunal would begin the next phase, the part designed not to extract confession, but to rewrite memory itself. Aldrich didn't speak at first. He simply studied her from across the frozen chamber, as if calculating how far she could be pushed before breaking became confession in itself. Then he closed the ledger with a soft snap that echoed like a death sentence. "We will resume shortly," he said. But shortly meant something different to the tribunal. They took her to a cell so small she could barely straighten her legs. Damp stone walls pressed against her. The January temperature inside matched outside well below freezing. Ice formed on the interior walls in crystalline patterns. The air smelled of mildew and extinguished candles, and the metallic tang of frozen stone. And yet, among all that cold, the scratch of her cloth remained faint, abrasive, alive. They expected solitude to fracture her, to make her question boundaries between pain endured and sin imagined. Because tribunals understood a truth most people forget: physical torture wounds the body, but isolation in freezing darkness murders the self. Hours blurred, or perhaps days. Isabel couldn't tell. Time here didn't flow it. Froze solid like the water in the bucket they'd left her. The sound of footsteps outside her door would crescendo, pause, recede. The pattern was part of torment, a reminder that she'd been removed from the world of people and inserted into a system where her existence was measured only by her utility. Finally, the door scraped open. Two assistants seized her by the arms, lifting her with practiced efficiency. Pain lanced down her frost-damaged limbs, but she swallowed the cry rising in her throat. Aldrich was already waiting in the chamber. The ledger opened once again. "We have found testimony from others that you consorted with spirits," he announced calmly. Isabel's head snapped up. She'd been isolated. She'd spoken to no one. "What testimony?" she whispered. Aldrich smiled gently, monstrously. "The testimony we require." This was the systemic cruelty that defined tribunals. Evidence wasn't discovered, it was manufactured. And the more a woman resisted, the more damning that manufactured evidence became. Aldrich stepped closer and placed a quill on the table beside her. "You need only mark the page. Admit that the night of your first questioning you felt the presence of an unholy visitor." Isabel stared at the quill. Her fingers trembled from cold, from rage, from exhaustion. The scratch of her cloth brushed her wrist. She clung to that sensation. "I am real," she told herself. "This cloth is real. Their lies are not." She refused. The assistants sighed with weary dread. They knew what came next. Isabel didn't, not fully. But tribunals thrived on that uncertainty. Pain you can anticipate is pain you can prepare for. Shock, true unrestrained shock, unravels even the strongest minds. Aldrich gestured to a wooden cabinet against the wall. An assistant opened it, revealing iron hooks, pulleys, and leather straps. Isabel's breath froze. This wasn't the stretching device she'd faced earlier. This was something more intimate, more precise, a machine designed to pull individual limbs in different directions, to tear muscle from bone without spilling enough blood to kill. "Prepare her," Aldrich said. The assistants moved quickly. Isabel felt straps tighten around her wrists and ankles, felt her limbs forced into unnatural angles. "A confession is mercy," Aldrich whispered. Then the mechanism jerked. Not slow tightening this time, a violent, sharp pull that shot fire through her body. Isabel screamed. The sound tore through the frozen chamber before she could stop it. Raw, primal. The sound of a body at its breaking point. The device halted just before her shoulder could dislocate. Intentional restraint. Strategic cruelty. Aldrich leaned in, watching her closely. "You feel the edge," he said softly. "Next time we go beyond it." But something unexpected happened. Isabel didn't collapse into pleading. She didn't surrender. She lifted her head, shaking, trembling, barely conscious, and whispered, "I will not give you what you want." Aldrich froze. This was the unpredictable shock. The tribunal, never prepared for a woman who, even in the moment her body nearly tore apart, still clung to her last shard of autonomy. A woman who understood that a stolen confession would outlive her longer than any injury. The assistants exchanged fearful glances because in that moment they realized something terrifying. Isabel's will was becoming a legend, and legends, unlike bodies, cannot be stretched into silence. They released the tension slowly. Isabel sagged forward, half-conscious, feeling the scratch of her cheap cloth again, a reminder that even in near destruction, some part of her refused to vanish. But the tribunal wasn't finished. If anything, her resistance had just condemned her to something worse. They returned Isabel to her cell long after midnight, though midnight was only a guess in the timeless frozen dark. Her body quivered with every breath. Her limbs felt hollow, carved out by pain. And still, she felt the scratch of her cloth against bruised skin. That faint rasp became rhythm pulse, a thread tying her to herself. Even shattered, she could feel it. Even abandoned, she could claim it. What tribunals never understood, what institutions of cruelty still fail to understand, is that systems built on obedience always underestimate the quiet resilience of people they try to erase, especially women. Isabel had nothing left. No allies, no certainty, no physical strength, but she had that small, abrasive reminder of her own body, her own reality. And that was enough to keep her anchored when the tribunal decided to deliver its final blow. The next morning, Aldrich entered her cell alone. No assistants, no ledger. Just a candle and the freshly pressed solemnity of a man about to orchestrate something irreversible. "You have become problematic," he said softly. "Others have begun to speak your name." That was the truth he feared. Not witchcraft, not heresy influence. In towns governed by fear, a woman who doesn't break becomes infection, a dangerous symbol inspiring others to question the tribunal's power. There were murmurs already, mothers asking why Isabel hadn't confessed, if guilt was so certain, daughters whispering that perhaps the tribunal didn't seek truth after all. Aldrich saw it happening like rot beneath floorboards, invisible until final collapse. So he presented her with ultimatum. "Sign the confession," he said, placing the quill before her, "or the sentence moves from correction to elimination." He meant execution. Sanctioned public absolute. For a moment, Isabel's eyes drifted to the quill. Her hand trembled violently. She could barely lift her arm. The world swayed in a haze of pain and exhaustion. But then the cloth brushed her forearm again. That same familiar scratch. It grounded her, reminded her that the only thing she had left, the final thing, was the truth inside her. She pushed the quill away. Aldrich exhaled slowly. A disappointed father. A weary priest. A man who believed authority granted him moral clarity. Then this is the end. But history stutters in strange places. What happened next was never recorded in tribunal's official documents, but it lived on in Carcassonne's oral memory. As they brought her to the square for sentencing on February 3, 1487, a crowd gathered, larger than expected, angrier than expected. Women in coarse winter dresses. Men with downcast eyes. Children whispering her name. And for the first time, Aldrich sensed something. Not rebellion. Not violence. But doubt. Doubt toward him. Doubt toward them. Doubt toward the machine of holy justice he believed unquestionable. Because Isabel didn't walk out as a broken heretic. She walked out as a woman who'd endured everything they threw at her and still refused to surrender her reality. The scratch of her cloth clung to her steps like a ghost, a reminder of everything they failed to erase. Some say a stone was thrown. Others claim silence cracked first. The records mention only a disturbance. But within months, the tribunal dissolved. Whispers became accusations not against Isabel, but against Aldrich's methods. Innocent blood, they murmured. Manufactured evidence. Excessive zeal. Isabel didn't live long after her sentencing. The injuries had carved too deeply into her body, infections spreading from rope-damaged wrists through her bloodstream. But the system that tried to break her died with her. That was her final defiance. We tell her story not as spectacle of suffering, but as warning. Because systems built on forced confession, coerced obedience, and state-sanctioned terror still exist today. They no longer use frozen ropes and racks. They use algorithms, propaganda, isolation, shame. The mechanisms evolve. The motives remain. So remember Isabella Vare when you hear someone punished for refusing to say what institutions once said. Remember her when truth is treated as stubbornness, when silence becomes resistance, when a single person's refusal threatens an entire hierarchy. Remember the scratch of the cloth, the small human detail no system can fully erase? If you want more historical reality that destroys comfortable myths about the past, subscribe to Flow of History. We're just getting started revealing what actually happened behind the legends. The systems that tortured Isabel still exist in new forms. Remembering is how we resist.